Hello everyone. Tonight I'm going to read from this little pamphlet, The Gothic, the Key to the Problem of Our Time, by Hugo R. Fack, published by the Free Economy Publishing Company in San Antonio, Texas. After the decay of the Roman Empire, which historical research attributes to continued and increasing scarcity of money metal due to the exhaustion of the mines, Europe experienced a long period of complete economic stagnation and spiritual barbarism known to us as the Dark Middle Ages. For almost 600 years, the human race groped in the dark, generation upon generation living wretched and dissatisfied lives, devoid of culture and science. The earth became a valley of tears, and many resigned themselves to a life behind the seclusion of high cloister walls to pray for a better life in the beyond. Human genius seemed extinguished. Scarcely a light worth recording pierced the darkness. An unexpected and glorious change. However, with the beginning of the 12th century, an unexpected and glorious change began to manifest itself in practically all European nations. Germany, France, England, Austria, Switzerland, Italy, Spain, the Scandinavian and Baltic countries experienced an economic and cultural rise such as these countries had never known before. Authentic documents of those days reveal that the money of that period was of a very special type, fundamentally different from our present-day money. And as far as we could ascertain, that special money worked marvels wherever it was adopted. An almost incredible prosperity set in, and the wealth created was so well distributed among the people that there was hardly any difference between the castles and the farmers' homes, as some chroniclers record. Historians unanimously agree on the splendor of that period. Professor René Thévin, the distinguished French scientist, states on this epoch, "After 6 centuries of misery and horror came the expansion of the 3 glorious centuries of the Middle Ages, one of the greatest periods of art and faith in the history of humanity, accompanied by the building of marvelous cathedrals, rivaling the greatest masterpieces of all time and all countries. This magnificent development carried the mind of man to heights which it has not often attained in history." If this were the isolated opinion of one historian, we might consider it greatly exaggerated. We find, however, that the writers of that epoch unanimously agree that it was a period of civilization during which all our contemporary dreams of an age of plenty actually had come true. In the History of National Economy by the late Dr. Damaschke, German historian and economist, we read, "The time from 1150 to 1450 was a time of extraordinary developments, a period of economic prosperity such as we have difficulty in imagining nowadays." Likewise, Sacheverell Sitwell, in his Study of Medieval Life, Art, and Thought, says, "Indeed, we can look back with astonishment upon this new, pointed, and floriated art of Europe that was rising out of the Romanesque. It was the greatest period of building activity that there has ever been, and no mere catalogue of names and places can convey any idea of the strength and quality of its products." The same author continues, "There has never been before or since in history anything at all like the physical and mental atmosphere of that age. It presented concrete and realized ambition on a scale that has no precedent. Life had turned into poetry. It had changed into a vigorous paradise that made it worthwhile to run its dangers as well as to enjoy its pleasures. the marvels of the Gothic. During these 3 centuries, from 1150 to 1450, were built the sublime Gothic domes, the splendid city halls, the spacious and beautiful guild houses, vast public markets, halls, luxurious private mansions, and fantastic castles which the modern observer admires at thousands of places in Europe. They are the incomparable monuments of a period that seems to have produced them without particular effort. An entirely new, daring, and incomparably beautiful architecture was developed, the Gothic, to give expression to man's yearning for uplift, to his faith, love, and hope, after the material care had been stilled. The splendid cathedrals of Cologne, Würzburg, Strasbourg in Germany, of Salzburg, Canterbury, and Wells in England, of Burgos in Spain, of Reims, Paris, Notre Dame, and Chartres in France, to cite but a few, are incomparable masterworks for all times. The richness and fineness of architectural design and originality, the exquisite craftsmanship, and the material wealth embodied in the buildings of that period have evoked the awed amazement and admiration of all later generations. An age of plenty. Historians and contemporary writers of that period agree that that era was an age of plenty, that poverty was unknown, that general prosperity had spread to all who worked, that the workers found as much work as they wanted to perform, that wages were unbelievably high, measured by their purchasing power, that the satisfaction of material wants gradually led to working a shorter number of hours and days of the week, that almost everything was paid for in cash, that long indebtedness had disappeared, that more and more quality goods were made, that clothes of the finest texture and highest durability were worn, that the homes were richly equipped with beautiful furniture and fine pottery, that peasants, considered the lowest class, were wearing silver buttons on vest and coat in double line mostly, and using big silver buckles and ornaments on their shoes, and that social differences between high and low, between nobleman and peasant, had almost been done away with. A worker's paradise. Johann Butzbach, one of the chroniclers of that period, records, "The common people seldom had fewer than 4 courses at dinner and supper. They had cereal or meat and eggs, cheese and milk for breakfast, and at 10 in the forenoon, and again at 4 in the afternoon, a light meal. Food fed to help was a negligible item, and that in an age of manual farming. Food fed to help was a negligible item, and that in an age of manual farming. The journeymen, boarding with their masters, were legally protected by city and county ordinances as to quality, quantity, and kind of food they were entitled to, apart from their wages. That these wages were not insignificant may be substantiated by the fact that the various workers' organizations, the guilds, even the humblest, competed in making rich donations for the construction of public buildings and churches in their towns and cities. For example, the Guild of the Sack Carriers in Danzig donated generously to the construction of the famous Marian Church and for one of its beautiful windows painted by a prominent artist. From many historical sources we find the following facts confirmed. The Monday was a free day, as the so-called Blue Monday. That day was set apart so the people could attend to their private affairs, and a very significant commentary on the standard of living during that period, they had sufficient time to devote to physical culture, to bathing, play at arms, and to attend the affairs of the guild. Since the number of official holidays, moreover, was at least 90, the journeyman actually did not work more than 4 days a week, and on these 4 days the hours of work were strictly regulated. When the Dukes of Saxony tried to increase the working time from 6 to 8 hours a day, the workers revolted. Under the independence of carefree prosperity, autocracy had lost its terrors. The life of the people became so voluptuous that the Dukes Ernest and Albert of Saxony found it necessary to issue special regulations regarding mores and manners, gastronomic and otherwise. They admonished their subjects that laborers should receive only 4 courses at the meals. Mental and spiritual rise. But man does not live by bread alone. Material things cannot satisfy the eternal craving of man's soul for spiritual food. And so it was also at that time. The soul of the people began to express itself in folklore and folk song. The great epics of the Nibelungen, of Tristan and Isolde, Gudrun and Walthari, and others were written. Minnesong and chivalry flourished. Veneration of the ideals of womanhood appeared. Refinement of customs and fashions developed and permeated all classes, ultimately even the life of the peasants and journeymen, whose guilds became largely institutions of self-improvement and learning. A high general standard of living never reached before or since pervaded all Europe, from Italy to England and the Scandinavian countries, from Portugal and Spain to Austria and the Baltic countries. Under such prosperous conditions, the population increased rapidly. Hundreds of now important towns and cities were founded in all countries, and the thinly populated Eastern Europe became more densely settled. What mysterious power caused all this change? The question naturally arises, how did it happen that this period became filled with material abundance, even without having the productive power of modern machines available? How was it that the joy of life rang through the land from high and low? How was it that no calls for revolution or war arose within and between the countries during that period in Europe, with the one exception of the struggle between the Kaiser and the Pope for predominance? Why was it that culture, beauty, ennoblement of body, mind, and soul permeated the masses of the people? Real culture. How was it, as historians state, that in the rural communities and in hundreds of city republics, an optimum, a maximum of human achievement had at least once in human history been reached? Why was it possible that mankind, after centuries of indifference and miserable existence, almost overnight became busy and prosperous, art-loving and creative, generous and gay? To what mysterious power must we attribute the change from the destitute and dreary medieval age to the wealthy and happy age of the Gothic and the troubadour? To be continued.